Hello there. Here I'd like to introduce my trilogy of books called The Taiwan Experience. The first of the three is already available on Amazon.com and other branches of Amazon. The trilogy's opening quote by a former PRC official, Xu Jiatuan, is key. Democracy is an unstoppable force. From a time only a few decades ago when most of the world was made up of one-party states to the present day in which one-party states are critically endangered, we have seen, and we are seeing, country after country adopting multi-party political systems. The message of recent history is clear. There are only two choices facing totalitarian regimes: embrace reform or have it forced upon you. Taiwan is an excellent example of the former, and it has demonstrated how one-party state ruling parties can avoid bloodshed and the fate of parties like the Soviet Communist Party, and even go on to thrive. The first part of Book 1, The Seeds of Democracy, deals with Taiwan's history. Many readers already familiar with the history of this island can skip this part. However, incredible as it may seem to some, there are even many Taiwan nationals who have only a very scant idea of the island's history. This is because during the pre-democracy era, the one-party state only taught selective parts of Taiwan's history and deliberately avoided others. This part of the book gives a brief but balanced account of Taiwan's history. Part 2 of the first book deals with the early process of democratization, beginning in the mid-1980s. I begin at this point as this was when I first arrived in Taiwan, and this book is written from the first-person perspective. I have mentioned elsewhere that the book can serve as a reference for how the world's final few remaining one-party states, particularly China, will democratize. As this book is a narration of my personal experiences living in Taiwan, this may not be obvious at first. But, as an example, let's take a closer look at what I have called soft deportation. This was the way Taiwan's former one-party state dealt with suspect foreign nationals who may have aired views contrary to those of the government. Soft deportation is still widely in use in the PRC today because, like as not, the country, with its export-oriented economy, is heavily dependent on countries in the outside world with vastly different political systems than China's own moribund one-party system. Yet, at the same time, it needs to ensure that political views contrary to its own are not aired to PRC nationals. The Chinese Communist Party rightly perceives that its very existence is dependent on this, and this is why we have the so-called Great Firewall of China. These circumstances are almost identical with those of Taiwan in the 1980s and early 1990s, when the ruling Chinese nationalists, the KMT or Kuomintang, censored all foreign news and ensured, as much as it was able, that suspect political views were not allowed to be heard within Taiwan. Hard deportation, that is, detaining foreign nationals and then kicking them out of the country with a prohibition on return, is often counterproductive, eliciting sympathy among those who know of the foreigner's fates and antipathy towards the government. Soft deportation, on the other hand, that is, allowing the foreigner to leave of his or her own accord when their visa is up, is the preferred method. After the foreign visitor leaves, they're simply not allowed re-entry. And for this, there are a range of justifications, which will usually be taken at face value by many people who know of the foreigner's fate. The same goes for foreign nationals already outside China to begin with. Various justifications will be given for refusing visas, rarely in any way related to the real reason. In recent years, since the Chinese Communist Party has gained control of Hong Kong's immigration authority, this technique has been seeing increasing use for keeping unwanted opinions out of the territory. Even as early as 2011, for example, I was prevented from boarding a Cathay Pacific flight to Hong Kong, even though I was once a resident of the territory for many years. Well, that's just one parallel between the PRC now and Taiwan as it was in the 1980s and 1990s, but the observant reader will find others too. Part 3 deals with the social changes that have taken place in Taiwan over the past 30 plus years. Why deal with both political change and social change, you may ask? Well, because the political changes could not have avoided engendering social change. And by the same token, the social changes could not have taken place without political change. While some of the social changes Taiwan has experienced in recent years are independent of political change, just as many are in other countries, most are not. The extent of social change is much greater than in most countries because in the mid-1980s, Taiwan had barely begun opening up to the outside world. Only a very small number of foreign nationals were resident in Taiwan at the time I arrived here, and those legally resident were even smaller still in number, for reasons that are explained in the book. The trilogy is not just a dry account of political change in Taiwan, but rather aims to give a full picture of how life in Taiwan has changed over the past 30-odd years. Anyway, that's a large topic in a nutshell. To get the full picture, please look the book up on Amazon or other e-book retailers, where it is available at a very, very low price. Thank you.